So for those who are too young to remember it, this is the sound we had to listen to connect to the internet in the early noughties, and it's also how long we had to wait, while also praying that no one rang us on the landline. My name's Christina Tarasova. I'm a curator at the BFI National Archive. In this session, we'll explore how communities formed in the early internet space. This was before social media as we know it today, pre-YouTube, pre-Twitter. We'll also look at how these communities made and distributed their work and the challenges we face in preserving it. So I'm really pleased to introduce the panelists. We've got the co-founder of beta.com, founder of Festhole, the creator of a series of social media bots, and currently touring the UK with his Festhole live comedy show, Rob Manuel. We've got the co-founder of beta.com, a designer, illustrator, copywriter, and brand owner, currently working as a creative director at Fairwill, Denise Wilton. And we've got the creator of the website rathergood.com, showrunner and co-creator of Bad Dinosaurs on Netflix, who's also worked across comedy, animation, live-action films, and music. Joel Veitch. And lastly, we've got filmmaker, writer, podcaster, and peer-to-peer culture enthusiast, whose film Steal This Film became one of the most downloaded documentaries in history, Jamie King. And so we can start with this legendary community, beta.com. So Beta has touched many lives, including my friends and I when we were growing up. It's given us viral videos like Badgers by Mr. Weeble, which we've recently preserved in the archive. Filmmakers like Ben Wheatley have also said that they'd not have had the career they have if it hadn't been for beta.com. Rob, could you tell us what beta.com is and how it began?
Beta started in 2001, and the basic idea was just to encourage people to be sort of funny and then tell people about it if they were funny. And the original ball of energy was sort of me and Joel, which I'd set up a mailing list of like just trying to attract like friends in who were a bit funny. I just had this gut feeling we could do something if we worked together. And then that got the attention of a man called Neil Stevenson, who at the time was running a website called popbitch.com. And he was working for a magazine company. And somehow that got a bit glued together, and we pitched it as the project this magazine company should be doing, which was take this ball of energy, run it better. And they sort of they paid for us to do that for a few months, and then they went, not sure about this. And they pulled the plug on it, but luckily we were able to carry on with the project without them paying for it. So that's basically what it was, and it still exists this day.
We were able to carry on because I ran around after the managing director with £1 so that I could give him I could pay for the...
Did you give him the quid?
I did give
I
him
didn't
the
know
quid.
that. I didn't know that. Yeah. So.
And how many readers or viewers did it have?
The newsletter at the time, well, not originally, but the newsletter around about probably 2004 had 100,000 subscribers. And then vaguely relevant to the sort of archiving and platform stuff, we ran it on this thing at the time called Yahoo Groups, which then Yahoo just let it just decay into a pile of crap until they pulled the plug on it entirely. And so then we had to rebuild it outside on our own system, and that decimated the readers. So it's currently about 25,000. So that's what it goes out at now. But still keep it going, still struggle away every Thursday trying to write the damn thing for a smaller audience.
Do they find that reassuring that it's still there?
Yeah, that's what I hear from people. I mean, that's what they might tell me to humour me. That it's like a little bit of the old internet that still exists, and some people find that reassuring, because like the internet changes so quickly and it's all gone so quickly. Actually, something I heard recently that I found quite intriguing was talking about, someone was saying to me that our generation had it lucky, because like in the 80s and stuff, all those VHS tapes, all that kind of stuff still exists, and you can buy it on eBay. But there's like a couple of generations come afterwards, and every platform has like lasted 3 or 4 years and then just died, and they can't access anymore that thing they grew up with. Whereas if you're into beta, it's still sort of there. Fly the flag for that one.
And there's a screenshot of it here. What's it like today?
Well, it's not as popular as it was, unfortunately, but but there's still like a hardcore of people who still come there every day, and they Photoshop silly images. I sort of see it a little bit like there's like one of those bearded old man panel shows on Radio 4 that's still going. No one understands why, but it's reassuring that it's kind of there, kind of thing. And so we've got the hardcore, like Monkey in there. He's an absolute genius. I think he's one of the absolute unsung comedy geniuses of the UK. He's mentioned his little picture there of Elliot Fletcher, and he enters every single competition, and he's like graduated now from entering everyone. Now he like basically sets them, because it's just easier for me to let him set them.
But at the peak of your excitement about the project, when it was in its absolute most pumped, what was it you felt you were doing? Like, what did you, amongst yourselves, what did you feel the excitement was?
I think I was just high on it all at that time, like 2005. I thought we were like Andy Warhol running the factory or something.
Right.
It was amazing though, wasn't it? Like, there was a huge amount of energy. I mean, we were younger, which helped. But it was a real thing, because like what we were doing was we were just mucking about, but we were saying, look, if you like this stuff that we're making, you can come and do it too, and this is where we are, and by the way, we'll be in the pub afterwards. And it kind of leaked into the real world, and it was really exciting, wasn't it? Because it was like it was a real thing as well as a digital thing.
How I got Joel involved was like Joel. I just, when we were 18, we were in the same flat at university, and then so when the beta stuff was like starting, like age 23 or something, I was like, I've got to get Joel involved, because he was just one of the funniest people I knew. And it just made much more sense to try and get someone involved who I knew was funny and didn't know that much at the time about the internet, than getting someone in who knew all the technical stuff but couldn't do a joke.
I mean, I think that's, it's still key, I think, to a lot of good stuff is like it's quite easy to be really good at one thing, but you have to have friends who are good at the bit you're not good at, right? I mean, that's not entirely true. There are lone geniuses, but they're very few and far between.
John T is a lone genius, and he's not here today. But he's an extraordinary guy. Because John T, I met him through running that website, and then he moved into my flat, and he'd just be there in the middle of the night, just this kind of noises as he's making his videos.
We're also fans of John T.
Yeah, I noticed you had him in your intro. Yeah.
Very much.
And he just invited us to his birthday, didn't he, last night?
He certainly did. His depressingly large number
birthday. Tell Joel to come, because he's saying he's not going to come. Not because of falling out, just like...
Oh, yeah, no, it's just a long way away, yeah.
I wondered, from that period, what do people still sort of talk to you about?
Oh, well, because like I do these like festival shows, and then and like maybe you get about 100 people, 120 people come, but there'll be like a hardcore of about 5 or 6 people that'll be middle-aged guys right at the end who'll like collar me, and they'll be like, wasn't the internet better 20 years ago? Don't you miss it, Rob? and like I sort of got to... I've paid for a ticket, so I've got to agree with them. But it frustrates me a little bit, because, like, from my point of view, there's still mischief to be had. There's still fun to be had, and it wasn't all brilliant 20 years. It's a lot of fun 20 years ago, but there's still loads of fun to be had, even if the internet has turned a bit fascist, quite majorly fascist. Even if like everyone's sucked into their phones like that. I sort of like the whole point of beta from the beginning, and I still believe it now, and I still believe it in the kind of projects I still run with, like festival stuff, is like it is important from my point of view to try and, it's a wanky phrase, but to be the change you want to see in the world. So if you want to see good stuff in the world, try and make good stuff. That's my thought. Even if it's you're hiding in the corner doing it and it's the one little bit of it that's all right, rather than giving in and going, oh, it was all better in the past, or I can't compete against endless kids on TikTok, you know.
I very much agree. Yeah, and moving on to the community side of Beta, Denise. So this community was one of the earliest of its kind on the internet, and you helped to nurture that. Could you tell us about your role in managing the community?
Yeah, I think in some ways I was the sensible person while these two were off doing big creative, slightly insane things. But I think at the time it was about building the community, getting people to come together and feel welcome and comfortable. Much like an offline community in lots of ways. You wanted people to know why they're there, know what it is that is expected, understand what the rules are, what the rules aren't. And also with that kind of community, it was important that you have people that create things, people that appreciate the stuff that is being created, so people that comment on it and proactively encourage the good stuff. And then you also have a lot of other people who are kind of lurkers, I suppose, who either consume the newsletter, so read the newsletter every week and share stuff, or they kind of lurk on the community and vote on things and that kind of thing. So it was really, like, part of my role was really to foster that relationship, because without all of those things, you don't really have what Beta is. So at the time, in some ways, there was a lot less stuff on the internet, I suppose. So people were always trying to look for the good stuff, and one of the things Beta did was show you where the good stuff was. And one of the things that we thought about a lot of the time was people like to be the cool people and know where the cool things are. So if you tell people where the cool things are, then they can look cool because they can tell everybody else. So it was a bit of a kind of self-fulfilling machine or whatever. People would create good things, other people would say nice things about those good things, which would encourage people to create more things, and then also through the newsletter and stuff we would share it so it would get a bigger audience, and that would also encourage people to make more good stuff, really.
Mm. And do you know who the community was? Did you have a good sense of who the people were, and were they also mostly British?
It was a bit of a mix. So I think to start with, there were lots of people from Rob's mailing list. There were some pop bitchy kind of people, and then gradually that kind of spread out. We launched it at the time of the first .com crash, really, like perfect timing. So lots of people were about to get made redundant or were redundant, so they had a lot of time on their hands. And it was fun to just talk to other people, who were around, and it was fun to keep making things and doing things. So that's how it grew, I think, a lot of people with time on their hands, I hate to say. But also it did start off as a largely British thing just because we were British, our sense of humour was very British. I remember when it started to get busy overnight, we were just like, shit, like we're asleep. Like, how are we going to moderate this overnight? Like, this is a thing. In the end,
and you were doing at that time, you go in the morning and just sort of tidy it up.
Yeah,
get
exactly.
rid of all the weird shit that's on a post-it.
Yeah.
But in terms of knowing who the people were, like I alluded to this before, but it was quite a physical thing for a while, wasn't it? We used to go and have regular meetups.
Yeah.
They would end up getting non-official ones that pop up around the country and stuff.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, and they're still friends now.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the trouble. Lots of things have moved to Facebook, which is why communities are a bit more fractured and very different now. But there is still a Beta community on Facebook. A lot of people who were friends then are still friends now. We've had, births, marriages, unfortunately some deaths, but we've had the whole shebang. Like, there have been people who've met and had relationships through Beta and all the rest of it. So, yeah, it's a largely British, but some international stuff. There was another website called FARC, if you remember. FARC
Still there? Yeah.
Okay, that was sort of in some ways an American version. People would be more likely if they were in the US or other places to potentially go there, just because the British sense of humour is quite specific, I suppose. Yeah, exactly.
And this might be hard to answer, but how do you think it shaped sort of the web going forward?
It's hard to answer. I think that I was thinking about this in terms of aesthetics. It's a bit hard to say. Like, obviously your style of animation stuff has been like massively copied, but that also sort of almost came out of like a punk aesthetic in the start. Like, everybody just doing stuff, like being creative, and it wasn't about the it wasn't about the execution, it was always about the idea. Like, so, which is what made it so great. It was a really good, easy way for people to get in and do something funny or brilliant without worrying about the fact that they hadn't got the perfect typefaces or they hadn't, you know, all of that kind of stuff. Which, so at the time, the web was, I mean, there were kind of techie people, there were designy people trying desperately, like myself as well, in fact, trying desperately hard to make things not look like they were HTML. But then there were things like this where people were like maybe techie and creative, but potentially thought that they weren't able to get their creative ideas out there. Beta gave them a way of doing that in lots of different ways.
I remember Rob being quite evangelical about this idea that it was much better to do 10 things quickly because one of them could be brilliant and the joke would still be good, than to spend ages and ages and ages doing one thing perfectly because that joke might not fly.
Yeah, exactly that.
And I think that is a really good thing to bear in mind when you're making.
Yeah, I think it was a bit accidentally anti sort of like tidy design, and that was sort of my fault because it came out of, part of it, the thinking came out of, I'd been working at a web design agency before I got involved in this stuff, and I was working as a programmer and an HTMLer, and I was just very frustrated in this agency because it always seemed to be the designers were taken off to the meetings to decide what the project with, and then we were told to implement it. And I was like, I've got loads of ideas, this is not fair, kind of thing. And so I ended up in this sort of like unfortunate rivalry with designers, which like we had a bit of
you won.
Sorry.
You won and you were right. So
no, but I remember really upsetting you with that, like when I drew over your rabbit design once. Remember that?
I actually don't remember.
Okay.
She's lying.
No,
sorry for the thing you don't remember.
But I think the way that beta is designed, people might not realise this, but it's very deliberate. Like it's kind of black and white, so that if it's on your screen and you're at work, you're less likely to get told off for it because people won't. It's not immediately obvious that it's something you shouldn't be looking at. And the other thing is, it's very accessible not in terms of usability, but it's very visually accessible. Like anybody could do that. Like anybody can feel like they can come here and take part. It's not, it's not fine art, it's not an oil painting. Anybody can come and hack something together, and the design is really meant to help you understand that.
One of your design decisions, I remember you mentioning at the time, that I thought was really great, was just simply that you were saying that it's black and white and grey because you weren't going to compete with the crazy colour that me and Joel were messing around with. Because any time you introduce it, it's going to clash.
Yeah.
And so it's what the colours that don't clash.
I just want to explain something because I've just realised that we're all from exactly the same milieu and moment in London. This was from a phase where there was basically 4 big web design agencies, and they weren't big in London. And I was working at Web Media. Where were you at?
Oh, the one I was at was called The Hub. We weren't particularly cool.
And it was like a time when everyone was like running around London. Like there seemed to be about 200 people, maybe less, doing these kinds of projects and kind of there was this intense excitement about something that was new and that you could do these things and that do you remember this phase when you were trying to find out how someone had done something? How did the guys at Beta do that?
Always viewing the source.
That guy made footprints walk up the side of the page. How was it done? Oh, it's an animated GIF and you're going to do it like this. And so there was this trading or like flash videos or this. And there was just this intense excitement of being in this, a very small culture where I couldn't believe the day rate I was getting. It was like £160 and I was 20. It may not be clear. I just realized we're all pretty much the same age, and it may not be clear that just how much excitement there was and how small everything was at that time.
It was a moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was a transitional moment in culture because, like, all media stuff beforehand had obviously been this thing of where how do you get inside it? There's like a load of gatekeeping, which is essential, and then suddenly the internet was there, and you could just put stuff up. It was amazing. Yeah. Obviously, that led to fascism. I'm sorry about that.
I think now might be a good time to play to illustrate this strange and wonderful world with one of a clip from Joel's film. We Like the Moon.
Film's probably a big word for it.
Yes.
It is close to us. We like the moon. But not as much as a spoon.
can you tell us a bit about this video? And what led you to make it?
The moon. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a really good example of what we were just talking about the doing things quickly thing. Like that was, I'd been in the pub with my brother and we'd been talking about how good the moon was, and we came home a bit half cut and improvised a song. So it's my brother on the guitar and me just looking around the room for inspiration, and we filmed it on a little DV camera that we had lying around. And then the next morning I went back and looked at it, and we did this quite a lot, and usually the things that you filmed after a couple of drinks would be useless and they would get taped over. But I thought there might be some legs in that. And we've been photoshopping on beta those little Spong Monkey characters, so I stuck them together to make them sing the song. And that's it, with like a still behind of a rhododendron, and done in a few hours on Flash to an improvised song. And it was, it went great guns. It was very silly, but the amount of effort and forethought in it was minimal. Yeah.
You say it went great guns, so it went very viral. And my question would be, at the time, these days, I mean, it's easy to measure the virality of a video.
Yeah.
What did it mean to be viral in 2002?
Well, you didn't have stats in the same way. Like that was a SWF, which is a flash file coming off the server into an HTML page, and because of the way that you would immediately get bankrupted and shut down if anything did any bandwidth, I had to have flash files coming off people's BT OpenNet servers and stuff that weren't monitored, so that I wouldn't have to pay for them. And so I didn't have any useful stats. I had like the number of times an HTML page had been served, which was, indicative that it was doing well, but no solid number for how many people saw it. But it went around the world, and we did like some adverts in America off the back of it, which is another story. Like that was very silly. But yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, we didn't have solid numbers, did we? You just kind of got a feel for when something had taken off because people started banging on about it.
Yeah.
I can remember the first time someone suggested that I, should have had solid numbers, and I'd squandered the opportunity of steal this film. And I was thought it was an article of pride that we had no numbers. Yeah. So it was like, screw you with your marketing bullshit. This is, we're from the internet. We don't have numbers.
Yeah.
And that was like a very short-lived window of.
Yeah, people do like to know numbers, don't they?
Yeah. Demographics. You gotta know them.
Yeah. We had very, very. You look at the server logs; they're bafflingly, difficult to make any sense of.
But I was impressed when that took off, that one, because I mean, specifically because then what happened, as you said, an ad agency got in touch saying, "Can we use this for Quiznos?"
Yes.
Yeah. And I remember you talking about the sort of like the process of all that happening, and how obviously the ad agency had to pitch it to the sandwich brand. And they didn't pitch it directly showing it.
No, they didn't. No,
they filmed a person watching it and laughing their heads off, and then they played that to the client, going, "That's someone laughing at your new campaign because they love it so much." And that sold it.
Yeah.
It was
early
hard to
reaction
sell.
video.
Yeah.
We did some stuff for Channel 4, some beta stuff for Channel 4 originally, and I remember going to a meeting at Channel 4 with a table full of executives.
Yeah, horrific.
All just looking absolutely horrified at stuff that we were presenting.
I've had that experience.
It wasn't great.
Yeah.
And a lot of the videos would have borrowed images found on the internet as well.
That was ubiquitous.
Copyright issues, did you?
Yeah, we did. I mean, that one, when we did, like, that ad was it was played in the Super Bowl. It went crazy. Yeah.
Whoa.
But I had to very carefully go back through everything and make sure everything had been remade completely safe, and obviously the backgrounds are all different and shot. But but just in general, I mean, there's a really interesting thing there, wasn't there, about the whole Photoshop culture, in that what our kind of core activity was, we were finding pictures on the internet, mucking about with them in Photoshop, and then sticking them up on beta. And then newspapers and things would start reprinting them or shoving them on their advertising funded websites, and everyone would get quite annoyed about, there were certain key offenders, but get quite annoyed about people making money off their art. But then again, we didn't own the images that we'd used, and you could say it's an original work, but I don't know, it's all very difficult to difficult to kind of pin down.
There's a sort of silly little moment in that moment of like newspapers lifting images virtually every day to fill their papers from the site, and then one newspaper, and it was actually the Daily Mail, got in touch. Some guy at the Daily Mail got in touch, going, "You know what? We know this is causing a problem. How about we have a deal where I message you and say, want to use this one, you message the person, and then I'll send them some money." And I was like, yeah, okay, fine, if that's what you want to do. And we did it once, and then the picture went into the paper.
Oh, God.
And then the journalist, got in touch with me the next day, said, I've like had 100 pieces of hate mail from angry Beatons, so that you're ripping me off. And he was like, that's enough for me.
I mean, there is something slightly self-defeating about.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other examples of that.
Yeah. It was like being in control of an angry mob that was always desperate to go have a fight with someone.
Yeah, I mean, I did a few commercials. I did some commercials here as well that were based on some of my other Flash work, and a lot of people got very angry about the being ripped off thing. Like, no, honestly, no, we just... Because the thing was, people... When you're doing commissioned work, like, the obvious thing to do is, if it's derivative of something else, is to talk to the person who made the thing and get them to do it. Yeah. But, and sometimes they do that, and that's great, and that's, we did a couple of those.
Sorry, you're saying that they were angry because of the thing that they'd seen online and loved.
They just
seen it
assumed
replicated.
On somebody else's behalf.
9 times out of 10 it was nicked,
Yeah.
and so they'd always assume it was.
Yeah, people assume the worst. Yeah.
I attacked dogs you didn't really want.
No. But didn't you have people swapping out images that were being used with permission for like something horribly offensive on the server, so that you find the Daily Mail had embedded awful things? Yeah. Deliberate acts of sabotage. Yeah.
Just to slightly twist it to the archiving thing, is like how all the images worked was like we didn't have any hosting on the website. They were all off-site and so on. Everyone's bits of free hosting, and so that's meant as the years have gone by, link rot and image rot has like destroyed loads of the images. And then a particularly brutal one was that some guy stepped in to say, I will run some hosting for Beta. And so then everyone sort of switched to using that. And then he just got fed up of it doing it at one point, and then he just disappeared overnight. And that took down massives of the back images. And then we wrote a bit of code that then queried on archive.org to see if we could get some of it back. And that rebuilt some of the archives, but it's still missing tons. It's all built on a house of sand, isn't it? The whole internet.
And as Joel talked about before, there's the problem of Flash not existing anymore.
Well, yeah, which is double, right? Because one part of that is what Rob was just saying. Like, I couldn't. In those days, you got charged for bandwidth, so none of my, and this is true of a lot of people, you'd not host your own stuff, right? You'd find people's BT open world accounts and what have you, and people would give you space, and those all disappeared, and those files disappeared, and that's true of images. And then Flash just stopped working altogether, which for linear stuff, animations...
Steve Jobs killed it.
Yeah. Like for animations, you can do video versions of them, like the Weeble stuff you were just showing, although it's not exactly the same experience, it's close. But for interactive stuff, it's just essentially dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is our best hope the Ruffle emulator, do you think?
I don't really know. I mean... Yeah, I mean, an ideal solution would be something ubiquitous that everybody could use rather than an arcane piece of technology. But
we brought back a pile of old beta Flash stuff using Ruffle, and it's okay. It's imperfect. Maybe it'll get better over time. Like there's one quiz that I did called Name That Beard that's completely unplayable for Ruffle because it just gets the fonts wrong, and then now the fonts are too big for the buttons and they fall outside the buttons. So it's okay in some cases.
And I just wanted to move from the web to the internet to Jamie. But before we show a clip from your film, could you just very briefly explain the difference between the web and the internet?
Okay. Well, I mean, so I'm not very good with dates, so I'm not going to attempt to do the exact chronology here. But this stuff's like around 2002, right? 2000, something like that.
Yeah.
So the film that we're talking about here, Steal This Film, was sort of the first one was 2006, and so in fact things were more webby by that point. The web was just really eating the internet, but there is and always was this layer beneath that. I mean, many layers, but but the one that the film surfed on was BitTorrent, which was just a sort of realization of the peer-to-peer structure of the internet, which the web doesn't have. It's a server-client thing, so it has this inherent issue, which has come up here actually in the time you've been talking. You know, you put all your data on a person's server, the person disappears. The centralization function means that all your shit is gone. Because at the same time, parallel to the web emerging and in the server-client relationship, you had this peer-to-peer structure in software like BitTorrent, which was kind of like about to eat the internet. So it was about to go from not existing to something like 36% of the internet's traffic getting eaten by BitTorrent by like 2008, and all that's gone now. But there was this moment where, you know, the establishment or whatever was scared of BitTorrent. You know, in the film that you're going to show a clip of, the U.S. government, the USTR. It's really a kind of another name for the CIA, mobilized resources to threaten Sweden to shut down the Pirate Bay, saying, we will put you on the watch list, which is reserved for like terrorist countries. We will put you on our trade watch list if you don't shut that shit down. So they were, you know, there was enough of a sense that this thing was, and so I'd argue that, so what's the difference? Well, there's a sort of, you know, there's the internet, and the web is part of a set of things that the internet enables. And then there are other things the internet enables, which were maybe at different points at some point was less visible, and then at some point suddenly became more visible. So the modern example is Bitcoin. You know, it's a peer-to-peer thing, which is a function of the internet, which is not part of the web, and it doesn't depend on any centralized service or server.
And that's how your careers evolved as well, from BitTorrent to making films.
Well, I'm just fascinated by that. I'm just fascinated because I'm sure, like you guys, my first interest in doing stuff on the internet came when I was in university at the time, and there were at the time the only people who got internet terminals were physics students, because that was who would want that. And I remember one of them fooling around with, you know, first it was Gopher actually, but then I saw something that turned out to be a web page, and I kind of asked the guy next to me, how do I get me one of those things? Who do I have to ask to get one of those? And he said, I don't think you have to ask anybody. You just put a file formatted like this in your home directory, and then and I was like, anybody can load that? He's like, yeah. And I was just, the fact that it was permissionless just drove me bananas. You know, as immediately the fact that you don't have to ask anybody and that you could spin up this thing. So I had a web page called Dr. Strange's World of Weird, but which is one of the first few thousand web pages, which is a weird thing to say. But that same fascination, BitTorrent emerges, and in a way it's fascinating in exactly the same way. Because you don't have to ask anybody, nobody can stop you, and suddenly you don't have to worry about your Flash file having 50,000 views, because one of the big innovations was it distributed the load of getting the files into all of those resources that you were using anyway. What you were doing in an ad hoc way, using bits of people's BT storage, suddenly it was literally saying, we'll leverage your unused domestic internet connection to distribute The Matrix or Agnes Varda or whatever else you want. And the fact was that went from being a curiosity to something seriously threatening in a very short amount of time, and that is just fascinating to somebody like me, just a general sort of shit kicker, anarchist type. So in that sense, Bitcoin joins up with that. I'm sure. I don't live in London anymore.
That's a whole other symposium, I think. Yes, that's a whole other symposium.
Yeah, but you asked.
Yeah,
I cannot finish it off if you
yeah.
ask. But
I was just curious, you're saying about the Pirate Bay, and there's still a website called the Pirate Bay.
Yeah,
but
just run by.
So what is that then now? Who runs it?
I can't be exactly sure, but I do know the Pirate Bay people, and every time I ask someone, there's one of them that's in Laos,
Yeah.
who either he is the gangster they refer to running it, or he's now involved with gangsters, or he's not doing it anymore and gangsters have taken it over. They always say gangsters, that part I know. So it went from being like 3 kids to being something very monetized. I mean, it was always a bit shady, but there was a phase when they were. I mean, what was unique about them was, I'm sure you remember reading the letters they used to write to the MPAA and stuff. They'd just get these letters off the MPAA, and then they'd say like screw you, we're not taking it down. You know, and it'd basically be extremely rude while everyone else was terrified.
Yeah, no, that does ring a bell now. So there's someone who was involved with Beta called Dan Ball, who did these kind of rap things. He got involved in that and did.
That's right, for a period. That was later on, but yeah.
Yeah, some sort of rap to the CIA.
Yeah, exactly. But it was real for a moment.
Yeah.
For a moment, whoever they are, they were scared, and I would say, in a way, scared in a way that they were not scared of YouTube. They learned how to accommodate the affordances, as they say, of YouTube, but they didn't learn how to accommodate Pirate Bay or peer-to-peer. They just they made it hurt to be involved in those infrastructures. That was their tactic. We will raise the cost of you being involved in this to the point where you may consider not doing it. Whereas YouTube, they just learned through demographic information and through filtering and algorithmic promotion and demotion of content, they turned it into their creature.
I was going to say, like, this is related, what you were saying there about the lack of gatekeepers being exciting. It's something we haven't mentioned, but that's really core to that whole thing, right? Is because it's hard to imagine now, but that was the first time you could self-publish.
Yeah.
And that was the joy of it, was like, oh, we don't have to, there's no gatekeepers, we can just do it.
That was all of it. And I just don't think, unless you were there at that moment, conveying that excitement that we had, it's
yeah, because that world didn't exist prior to that moment. Before that, everything had a gatekeeper, which is why comedy TV was run by, you know, a very, very small group of people from a very particular group within a particular college. You know what I mean? Like, and that just disappeared. And well, no, it didn't. Those people are still the establishment is still there, but we were able to do our own thing. But similarly, the switch over to YouTube meant that the gatekeeper has just changed nature now. It's kind of back, but it's an algorithm instead. Of an old school tie. Yeah, it's interesting. That moment has gone, I think.
Before we run out of time, we'll just play the clip from Jamie's film, which quite well illustrates sort of how that started, how Pirate Bay started, and then we'll carry on.
Still is film 1, right?
Yes.
All right.
Gatekeepers was born from a very loose group of people communicating on the IRC chat channels. We were basically into doing different kinds of playful internet projects and reappropriating the term of piratbyrån by cutting away the anti was one of those like playful impulses. So we just did it. And people had very different backgrounds. It was a very loose group. Everyone felt that this was something new and unexplored, but at the same time something that we knew would definitely grow in importance for several years.
We're very running out of time, but the last question I wanted to ask you, that this film's been downloaded over 6 million times, and in that sense, in an archival sense, lots of copies keep stuff safe. Do you think the piracy of it has acted as a type of preservation?
It did, because BitTorrent, like I said, they've successfully sort of deterritorialized BitTorrent, so that function is less effective than it was. I mean, I don't know how many people are still using BitTorrent in here, for example. A tiny percentage, like 4 admit to it. 5, 6. But for a period of about 20 years, I mean, you can still find it. I think if you do a dynamic hash table search, it's still there somehow. So yes, but there are, I would say, we talked about this when we were talking on the phone, if you think about, there's a website called Karagaga. I don't know whether any of you know about Karagaga, you're film enthusiasts, but it's the best film archive that's been created in the history of the world, and it's pirates who are literally part of the pirate community. They are the Pirate Bay know them. They know the Pirate Bay. They knew ISO Hunt. They knew they were a gang, but they just happened to be into art cinema, and so their thing was start a BitTorrent platform, which would be sharing the art film, and they're still at it. If you can get an invite, there's nothing as good as that. No, not even close. So our film is up there, I think, but there's more important questions than whether still this film is maintained. It's not that good. I shot that and it's out of focus. I didn't look at which clip you were going to use.
Maybe someone in the audience has that more important question.
I can fix it. I can fix it with Stable Diffusion now. But
do we have any hands up? Any thoughts?
Nothing.
Oh, we can carry on then. I suppose we can open up to the group about preservation in general. Sort of an interesting question I thought of is that if you had unlimited resources and could go back in time, what would you have done to preserve some of the stuff that you've lost?
Do you know what the most annoying thing I've got is like a big pile of mini DV tapes of stuff like the birth of my children, and my camera died years ago at some point.
Did you really watch that though?
Yeah, but I should keep it, right? It's an important thing, and it's retrievable, but I've got to go through a bunch of hoops. Like I've got to get a FireWire card, I've got to fit it in the computer, I've got to buy an old camera or find someone who'll lend me one, get the cable, plug it in, and do you know what I mean? Like, so I haven't got around to it, and as every year goes by, it gets less likely that I'll ever get around to it. I wonder whether all of that stuff is ever gonna. See, like what I did, interestingly, is there was a period of a few years where I would edit my photos and shove them on Flickr, which I stopped doing when smartphones kind of started just backing everything up. And so I did go back through and I printed out 3 post sacks full of my entire Flickr archive, because they're all edited and selected. So there's this very small window of my life where it's really well physically documented, but everything else is presumably going to get lost at some point. Yeah. I don't know what the answer to how that works doesn't answer your question. I would have edited my photos and videos when I took them, instead of having years of just overwhelm, which I'll never go through. It's probably a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Do you want to be controversial, Denise? You were threatening to be controversial.
No, the only thing I wonder, it's hard. There's a lot of stuff, just as you were saying, there's a lot of stuff, and the world is burning, and we need to decide what we're going to keep and what we're not going to keep. And it is hard. Like in the olden days, so like, for photography, for example, was expensive. So, if you were, when I was growing up, certainly you could get 24 or 36 photos on a film, and you would be very careful about the photos that you took, because you just you couldn't necessarily afford to keep processing them and stuff like that. But now it's very easy, so we just take pictures of sandwiches or take pictures of whatever. And how do we decide what to keep and what to get rid of? And beta, like a lot of the richness of beta is in the conversations around the stuff, not just the stuff itself. There's big cultural kind of things that happen that have been discussed and pulled apart and put back together. Like all of that stuff is there. It's all really rich and interesting. But how you would sift through that and find out the stuff that actually is good and worth keeping, and the stuff that is just people like infighting and being stupid. Like it is hard to know. And we can't keep on keeping everything. Like, we can't keep on keeping all of our emails back to the time we first had an email address. We can't keep on doing this, because look at the world. Like, it's too environmentally costly. So there is a big question there about curation and who decides that.
I don't know, like I lost, like Rather Good, the original rathergood.com site was made by me writing HTML in Notepad. And then that got too difficult, so I got like a content management system. But keeping that secure was impossible because it was just me, and it got repeatedly hacked until eventually it was hacked to the point where I just had to kill the whole thing because it was I couldn't clean it. And so now there's like a WordPress, or the last quite a lot of years there's just been a WordPress thing there now, which is safe, but the original site is dead, you know, and it will never come back. And most of the content from it is dead because those formats are not readable anymore, and the files have disappeared anyway.
Also, when you think about it, this is a lot of our working lives, right? Like, you know, we've all designed websites for a long number of years. How many of those things that we've done for clients that were still there? It's all gone.
Yeah. And also, my backup was like a NAS drive, like a multiply redundant NAS drive, which had decades of work on it, and 2 of those disks went at the same time. So all of that's dead. So all of it's gone. You know,
Well,
but the world still continues.
Bleak point to end on, but we've run out of time. It's all gone.
It's all gone.
And if you keep it, it will burn the forest.
And the world is burning.
Yeah. That's part of that quicksand that you were talking about. The internet's a library built on quicksand, and it's our challenge to collectively try to keep some of that from sinking.
The one I miss is that I did a project like 10 or so years ago, which was called Us Versus Them, and we spat out an enormous amount of interactive viral things, and they're all gone because they were part of a newspaper website, and they turned the server off. And even if they hadn't turned it off, they're all they were so sort of intricate because there'd be like bits of back end code, bits of front end code, dependent on libraries, depending on images here and there. It would be someone's full-time job to keep them alive if they had to keep them alive, and it was like some of the best work I ever did, and that's gone. So that's sad.
Thank you.